Hello and welcome to the next video. In this part of the 2.0 series, we're going to be making a drift out of 5-6 inches of 1/2 inch round stock. This is going to teach us a little bit about upsetting, a little bit about drawing out and making things round. We saw some of that in the 1.0 series as well. The kind of key things that you want on a drift are you need it to be small enough that the point will go through whatever material that you've either drilled out or punched out. You also want to make sure that you're going a little bit bigger than the final size that you want. The steel is going to expand and shrink as it heats up and cools down. So if you drift right at 1/2 inch and you want a 1/2 inch hole, it's going to shrink on you and get a little smaller than that. The other reason that you want a bit of a swell in here is you don't want the widest part of your drift to be at the back end. Ideally, I want this to be going through, get to the widest part, and then fall out the bottom. If my widest part is right here at the back end, then it'll get stuck in the steel and I'll need to do something in order to knock that out. So, first thing we're going to do is get this hot. We want to take a nice short heat and then put an upset in it. We're looking for that upset to be kind of right in that area right here. So not right at the back, just a little ways down. So let's get this hot. While I'm heating this up, we should think about how long of a heat we want on this. Anytime you're upsetting, you're doing the opposite of drawing out. You're pushing steel back in on itself. The steel is not real happy about this. People say that's why it's called upsetting, because it's kind of upsetting to do for you and the steel. What we want to make sure we're doing is get things good and hot and keep our heat short. Anytime your heat starts getting longer than about 1.5 times the thinnest dimension of your steel, you get a whole lot of bending and a lot less upsetting. So the more localized we can keep that heat, the easier this is going to be for us. So I'm going to get that hot. I'm going to give it quite a bit of air here. Try and get it hot fast so the heat doesn't creep down too far down the bar while we're going. That's looking pretty good. I don't want this back end heated or it's going to be upset. So I'm going to bring it here, quench that off. Make sure it's got plenty of time to cool down because that heat will creep back down into the end. I'm going to grab it with my hammer and tongs, or with my tongs, and give it a few sharp blows. And you can see it's starting to bend on me. When I go to straighten this out, I need to be careful that I'm not going to undo the upsetting I've done. So I'm going to use my tongs to support the back end of it. It'll be supported on the front end there. And I'm going to hit on the unsupported part of the steel to knock it back into shape. I've got a little bit of swelling in there. I wouldn't mind just a little bit more than that. So let's take one more heat and we'll upset that a fraction of a hair more. We'll let the heat get a little bit long on this one. So I'll show you that not only can you quench the tip, but you can use the watering can in order to quench the back end as well. Really localize that heat where you want it to be. All right. So we've got a longer heat than we want. I really want just an inch or so there in the middle. So we're going to bring it here to the quench tub. I'm going to quench off this end. Grab the watering can. Hold the piece of steel with the point up. Cool off that back end. Really localize my heat. Bring it here to the anvil. Flip it around. And again, some sharp blows, and I've got a pretty good swell. I do have a bit of a bend, so we'll come straighten that out again. You can see now I've got a pretty good swelling in there. A 1/16, 1/8 of an inch or something is really all we need here. It doesn't need to be massive, but we definitely do want to make sure it's bigger in the middle. Let's put that back in the fire and we'll start heating it up, and we'll work on this back end, putting a chamfer in. This tool is one that I lose all the time. I'm only making it out of mild steel. If I'm not doing a lot of talking, it takes me about 5 minutes to turn one of these out. So I don't worry overly in perfection. If I had to make a large number of half-inch drifted holes, I would get a higher carbon steel, 4142, something like that, that is going to last a lot longer. Then I would take more care in making this. But if it only takes you 5 minutes to make and you lose them all the time, you know, put that level of effort into it. All right, we've got it good and hot on the end. I'm going to come in and I'm going to put a lazy square here on the back. So I'm just knocking it in, not worried about getting real sharp corners. And then I'm going to come in, put it on the diamond, and take it to an octagonal shape. Then I'm going to come in and just knock things in a little bit. This one, as they often do, is a little smaller than I needed. And also, it's got a bit of a funny angle there. I'm going to flatten that out by just putting it face down on the anvil, giving it a couple hammer blows, and that'll smooth things out. Keep it good and straight. I took this probably a little smaller than I really need to for the struck end of the tool. That's not going to cause a problem. The key things that you're looking for are, one, making sure that the back end is smaller, and two, that you've got a little bit of a knocked in on the edge there. I'll take a couple more hammer blows to finish that up. Knocking this in will just make sure that as I'm striking on the back end and it spreads out, that will take longer before it starts folding over on itself and mushrooming out. Once it starts mushrooming, you start getting cracks. You've got to stop using that tool until you can go in there and clean it up. Those cracks in that mushrooming are dangerous. You strike the back end and little bits of it can fly off at high speeds and certainly cut you or worse. But we're done with this back end now, so let's flip it around. And we're going to work on the part that drifts through. We'll put a points on here, draw it out, and then take it round. All right, we've got this good and hot. I'm going to bring it over here to the anvil, and I'm going to start by putting a points on it. I don't need this to be especially sharp. But I do want to establish that point first. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to come back here to the face of the anvil now and draw that out. Got a bit of a bump there. Flip it over. Hammer that back flat. And mostly what I'm looking for here is a nice even taper. This is going to be driven through another piece of steel. The more even this is, the easier it'll drive through that. That's looking pretty good. Let's heat this up one more time. We'll take it to an octagon and then we'll take it round and we'll be done with this drift. Got it a little hot that time. We saw some sparks. You do need to be careful with these coal fires. They heat up pretty quickly. So I'm putting it on the diamond, hammering along that, softening up my blows as I get to the tip where it's thinner. Try and get a relatively even octagon here. And then I'm going to come in, start doing blows all around it, knocking those edges in, taking it to round. It's exactly the same process that we used in the 1.0 series. when we were making our S-hooks. This is why practicing all those skills is so important. They come in handy in all kinds of different projects. All right, that is looking pretty good. Let me give it one hit here to straighten it. So now we've got it nice and straight. I'm going to go ahead and quench this off, and we're going to say that we're done with it. This drift will be ready to be used.